During our divorce hearing, my wife leaned back, laughed, and said she was taking half my millions, including the $15 million estate my grandmother left me the night she died. The whole courtroom gasped. Some even whispered that I'd lost everything. But they didn't know what I knew. They didn't know about the months of lies, the stolen money, the betrayal behind glass walls, or the truth I'd been carrying in a single envelope. So I stood up, walked past her, smile, handed the judge my file, and said, "Check again." The judge looked down, then looked at my wife, and burst out laughing. That was the moment everything flipped, and the moment I realized how little I ever knew the woman I married. My name is Cyrus Vero, and this is the story I never thought I'd have to tell. Before I share it with you, I want to know you're here with me. Just drop a simple hi in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. It means more than you know. Sometimes the smallest connection reminds you you're not alone. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. And if my story reaches you in any way, please consider subscribing. It helps my voice be heard, and it reminds me that someone out there still listens. Thank you for being here. During our divorce hearing, my wife leaned back, laughed, and told the judge she was taking half my millions, including the $15 million estate my grandmother left me. The whole courtroom stirred like someone had thrown a rock into still water. And I sat there feeling every stare land on me like a verdict long before any ruling was made. I could feel the cold fluorescent lights pressing down on my skin, as if the room itself had already decided I'd lost. That was the day I learned how quickly a person you love can turn you into a fool in front of strangers. I still remember the stale scent of paper and old wood lingering in the courtroom, and the way my palms sat open on the table trying to ground myself while Marina stood up as if she were walking onto a stage she owned. She smiled, slow, confident, almost triumphant, before looking straight at Judge Alara Kingston and stating that she wanted half of everything I had built. My company, my investments, and worst of all, the $15 million estate my grandmother had placed in my hands with her final breath. Marina didn't flinch when she said it. She didn't hesitate. She didn't even look at me. She let the words hang in the air as if she had practiced them. And when she added in that same cool tone that the law was on her side, I felt something inside me twist. Her attorney, Gareth Holloway, made it worse. He rose to his feet and guided the narrative, effortlessly framing me as the one who owed her everything. According to him, Marina had supported me through my success, sacrificed her own ambitions, and was now entitled to the same fortune I had spent years fighting for. The gallery murmured. Someone even gasped when Marina leaned forward and casually added, "He wouldn't have any of this without me. I'll be taking what I deserve." I watched her with a numbness I couldn't explain. 3 years of marriage, and at that moment she looked like a complete stranger wearing my wife's face. The worst part wasn't her words, it was the ease with which she delivered them. Like she had been waiting for this moment. Like the courtroom was merely her final move in a plan she'd already won. But then I did something she didn't expect. I stood up, slowly, calmly, without saying a word to her. The room fell silent. Marina's smile flickered just a little when my hand reached into my briefcase and came back up holding a single brown envelope. It wasn't thick. It didn't look impressive. But it was heavier than anything I'd ever carried. I walked it to the bench and placed it gently in front of Judge Kingston. "Your Honor," I said, my voice steady in a way I didn't feel I'd like you to check again. The judge opened it. Her eyes scanned the first page, then the second, then the third. Her expression shifted curiosity, surprise, disbelief, and finally something I had been waiting months to see. Recognition. Understanding. Then she looked at Marina, and she laughed. A real laugh. Sharp, sudden, slicing through the courtroom like a blade. Marina's face went pale. The gallery erupted again, this time in shock instead of pity. And I stood there watching everything I had carried alone finally begin to speak for itself. To understand how we ended up at that moment, you need to know what came before it. You need to know who Marina really was, and how I fell into her world without ever seeing the trap beneath my feet. So let me start from the beginning. 3 years earlier, before courtrooms, lawyers, and envelopes filled with truth, my life looked very different. I had just sold my first education app, LearnLift, for $2 million, a number I still wasn't used to saying out loud. Everyone around me kept calling it a breakthrough, but all I felt was pressure. Pressure to prove it wasn't a fluke. Pressure to keep building. Pressure to pretend I wasn't terrified someone would uncover how overwhelmed I really was. I went to a charity gala at the Colorado Children's Hospital because I thought being in a room full of successful people might make me feel less like an imposter. It didn't. The ballroom felt like a different planet, polished, loud, bright. Everyone there seemed to glide effortlessly through conversations about business expansions, investments, new ventures. Meanwhile, I stood near a silent auction table trying to look like I belonged. That's when Marina walked in. She didn't just enter the room, she redirected its energy. Every head turned, even mine. She carried herself like someone who was completely at home in places like that. Her dress was simple but perfect, her smile warm but sharp, and when her eyes met mine, I felt something shift in my chest before she even spoke. She approached me like she had known exactly where to find me. "You're Cyrus Vero, right? The mind behind LearnLift." She said it with a confidence that made my throat tighten. She described my app better than most journalists had, mentioning specific features and updates only someone who followed my work closely would know. I was startled, but in a way that flattered me more than it worried me. I told myself she must have just done her research. We talked for 20 minutes straight about ambition, burnout, the strange loneliness that comes with success. She told me about growing up being underestimated, about pushing herself to prove people wrong, about fighting her way into the world she wanted. She mirrored my insecurities so perfectly that it felt like she understood me before I had even spoken them. At some point, a server passed behind her and said, "Excuse me, miss," followed by a name that wasn't Marina. She stiffened, laughed it off, and changed the subject so smoothly that I barely noticed. Later, I would replay that moment over and over. But that night, all I saw was a woman who made me feel seen in a way no one else had. Before the gala ended, we slipped out to the terrace where Denver's skyline cut into the clear night. Our conversation paused, but the connection didn't. She looked at me like she already knew I'd fall for her, and maybe she was right. By the time we had our first date, a late-night walk through the quiet streets near Sloan's Lake, I was already certain I had met someone extraordinary, someone meant for me, someone I believed saw the best in me. I didn't know then that she also saw something else, something she wanted, something she planned to claim. But that part of the story would come later. For now, all I knew was that Marina seemed to understand exactly who I was, and exactly what I needed. I just didn't realize she also understood how to use it. The months that followed felt almost unreal, as if someone had taken the quiet, uncertain life I once lived and replaced it with a version that finally belonged to me. Marina and I spent long evenings by Sloan's Lake, where the water reflected the Denver skyline and made everything feel softer and easier. We'd sit on the old wooden benches and talk about dreams, fear, ambition, and all the things I never admitted to anyone else. She had this way of speaking that made me feel less alone, as if she understood every jagged corner of me without needing an explanation. On weekends, we wandered through the Santa Fe Art District, letting ourselves get lost in rooms filled with color, texture, and stories far louder than our own. She moved through those galleries like she belonged in every frame, and I remember thinking how lucky I was to walk beside her. Every doubt I'd carried about myself, every insecurity about success, timing, and whether I deserved any of it seemed to fade when she was around. She always knew what to say. When I was overwhelmed, she told me I was stronger than I believed. When I doubted myself, she reminded me I had already built something that mattered. When I hesitated, she told me she believed in my next step, even before I took it. And as my career grew, that next step arrived faster than I expected. Max Mind Academy. The second app I'd been building in silence finally attracted major sponsors. A tech foundation reached out. Investors wanted meetings. And for the first time, I felt the weight of expectations transform into something closer to momentum. I hired my first small team of developers, rented a modest office downtown, and tried to find my footing in a world that felt both thrilling and terrifying. Through all of it, Marina was always there, always appearing at the exact moment I hit a wall, walked into burnout, or spiraled in doubt. It was uncanny at times, almost scripted, as if she always knew where my emotional breaking points were before I reached them. I didn't question it then. I thought it was love, the kind that fits too perfectly to analyze. One evening after a long week of meetings, she brought up the idea of adding her name to one of my main bank cards. She said it would simplify things, that some of our shared expenses could be handled more efficiently, especially as my schedule got busier. Her tone was calm, her logic sound, and the way she phrased it made me feel like refusing would be a sign that I didn't trust her. So I agreed. I didn't think twice about it. I saw it as one of those natural next steps couples made, the kind that made life easier, the kind that brought people closer. I had no idea then that it was the first move in a much longer game. A few months later, I stood with her on Lookout Mountain as the lights of Denver glittered below us. The wind was cold, the sky clear, and the world around us felt perfectly still. I remember holding the ring in my hand, terrified my voice would crack when I asked her to marry me. When she said yes, her tears looked genuine enough to make me believe I'd finally found a home. I thought that night was the beginning of something unbreakable. But signs began to appear even before the wedding. A text message from an unknown number buzzed on her phone late one night. She said it was just a coworker, a woman from her team, nothing to worry about. I believed her. I had no reason not to. Love has a way of blinding you long before you realize you're walking into darkness. Now when I look back, all those little moments, the ones I brushed off as harmless, stand out like flashing red lights. At the time, though, I just smiled and kissed her goodnight, unaware of how much I was ignoring. And as this chapter closes, I can only admit the truth I refused to see then. Now looking back, they were all signs I shouldn't have ignored. Everything shifted when my grandmother Amara Vero passed away. She was the most influential person I had ever known. The kind of woman who built her life from nothing and carried herself with a quiet strength that didn't need to be announced. She taught me how to be independent, how to trust myself, and how to stand on my own, even when the world felt too heavy. Losing her created a hollow space in my chest I couldn't fill. In the weeks that followed her funeral, I learned she had left everything she owned to me. A historic home in Boulder, 2 plots of land in Aspen, a collection of antique paintings and jewelry she had spent decades acquiring. The total value was $15 million, a number so large it barely felt real. I didn't feel worthy of any of it. It felt like carrying a legacy too heavy for my hands. Marina was the one who told me I should be grateful, not overwhelmed. She held my face in her hands and said that my grandmother believed in me, that this was a sign of our future, not a burden. For a moment, I let myself believe her. But then came the first request that made something inside me stir. Marina suggested we add her name to the Boulder house deed to make tax filings easier. She made it sound practical, logical, convenient, and I almost didn't notice how quickly she dismissed my hesitation. She smiled the way she did whenever she wanted something from me, soft, persuasive, almost gentle enough to disarm me. And despite the unease curling in my stomach, I convinced myself she was right. As the months passed, her spending changed. She bought designer clothes, new jewelry, and expensive handbags. She started hosting lavish brunches for a new circle of friends I barely knew. Women who complimented her rings and asked about her married to a tech founder lifestyle. She stopped asking before making large purchases. She stopped pretending the money mattered. She carried herself like someone who had already earned a wealthy life, even though she had never once asked me what I wanted for ours. I kept brushing off my discomfort, telling myself marriage was an adjustment. But one evening at a fundraising gala in downtown Denver, a stranger approached me. He recognized me from a podcast interview and congratulated me on the success of my app. Then, almost casually, he asked how Marina was doing and said he remembered seeing her frequently with a well-dressed man months before she and I had even met. The way he phrased it sent a shock through me, but before I could ask more, Marina appeared beside me, smiling too brightly. She wrapped her arm around mine, thanked the man, and pulled me away before he could continue. She brushed it off effortlessly. She said people often confused her with others, that it was nothing, and I let it go. I told myself it didn't matter. That night, though, I lay awake feeling a tension I couldn't name, a sense that something around me had begun to shift. I didn't know then that my grandmother's estate wasn't just an inheritance, it was the trigger, the moment the ground beneath me started to split. and I didn't know that everything would soon collapse. But I should have. Because from that point on, nothing in my marriage would ever be the same. I just didn't see it yet. In the months after my grandmother's estate was transferred to me, my life became heavier without me noticing it. Work was accelerating in ways I had dreamed of for years. Max Mind Academy was gaining traction, new partnerships were forming, and my small team was finally starting to feel like a real company. Every day was packed, demanding, and exhausting, but it was also the closest I had ever felt to building something meaningful. Yet as my career grew, Marina seemed to drift farther away. At first it was subtle. She was tired more often, distracted, quiet in a way that felt distant rather than peaceful. But then the changes sharpened. She started coming home late, giving vague reasons that didn't quite match. Her phone, which she used to leave anywhere, was suddenly always face down, locked and within arm's reach. She changed her password twice in a single month. When I finally asked if everything was okay, she turned it around on me. She said I was becoming controlling, that my stress was affecting her, that she felt suffocated by my questions. I backed off because I didn't know what else to do. But the more I stepped away, the more uneasy I became. The worst moment came from something small. A coworker from a cafe I visited often mentioned seeing Marina having lunch with a younger woman multiple times, sitting close, laughing in a way that looked more intimate than professional. His comment wasn't meant as anything more than casual conversation, but it planted something cold inside me. Marina had told me she'd been eating alone those days. I tried to ignore it. I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt, but the doubt didn't leave. One afternoon, I decided to do something simple and kind. I picked up Marina's favorite lunch from the Thai place near her office and drove over, thinking the surprise might help reconnect us. I carried the warm bag of food through the lobby of her building, smiling politely at the receptionist who recognized me, and walked down the hall toward the conference rooms. And that was when I saw it. Through the clear glass wall of one of the meeting rooms, Marina was standing pressed against Evelyn Cho, her hands tangled in Evelyn's hair, their mouths locked together in a way that told me this wasn't new. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a relationship, a real one. My chest tightened so fast I felt dizzy. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't understand how the woman I married could inhabit a world I knew nothing about. The bag in my hand slipped and hit the ground, the containers inside crashing loud enough to echo down the hall. Marina and Evelyn froze. Their eyes lifted toward me through the glass. For a moment, none of us spoke. Marina pulled back first. She straightened her blouse, adjusted her posture, and walked out of the conference room as if she were coming out of a casual meeting. "Cyrus," she said calmly, almost too calmly, "what are you doing here?" I could barely speak. She glanced down at the food on the floor, sighed, and told me I was overreacting. She said Evelyn understood her in ways I didn't. She said my work consumed me, that I had abandoned her emotionally, that she needed connection. I told her this wasn't connection. It was betrayal. She disagreed. She said relationships could take different shapes. She said I was being dramatic. She said I didn't understand her needs. Not once did she apologize. Not once did she look sorry. Instead, she stared at me like I was the obstacle in the room, a problem that needed managing. When I told her this couldn't continue, she didn't flinch. She told me plainly that this marriage had been an investment of time and energy for her, that she deserved something back for the years she'd given me, that she wanted her return. She said it as if she were discussing a business deal, not a life we had promised each other. It was in that moment, right there in the hallway outside a glass room, when the truth finally settled. My life with her had never been about love. It had been a calculation, a project, and I was the asset she intended to cash in on. As I walked out of that building, I heard my own breath echoing in my ears, and a single thought followed me to the parking lot. Maybe Marina had never seen me as a husband. Maybe from the beginning she had only seen a financial plan. 2 weeks after the day in the conference room, I received a thick yellow envelope from a courier who looked like he didn't want to hand it over. Inside was the divorce petition Marina had filed. Reading the demands felt like being hit by a wave I couldn't brace for. She wanted half the value of my company, half of my grandmother's $15 million estate, half of every asset acquired during our marriage. She wanted my car, my savings accounts, and a portion of my investment portfolio. It wasn't a request. It was a complete takeover. And the attorney representing her, Gareth Holloway, had a reputation in Denver for dismantling men financially and emotionally. I suddenly understood why Marina had seemed so confident when she smiled at me in that courtroom. She hadn't walked in unprepared. She had built her case long before she ever filed it. The more I read, the clearer it became. The petition was crafted with surgical precision. Marina claimed she had sacrificed her career to support mine. She claimed she had provided strategic guidance that directly contributed to the growth of my company. She claimed she had assisted in managing my grandmother's estate and was partially responsible for its increased value. None of it was true, but the paperwork made it look undeniable. What made it worse was how Gareth used my own words against me. Phrases I'd said proudly in interviews, "My wife always stood by me," or "She's been my emotional support," were reframed to prove her critical role in my success. They twisted every compliment I had ever given her into evidence. When I walked into my first deposition, I still believed I could explain myself. But Gareth didn't ask questions to find answers. He asked questions to trap me. Every time I clarified, he reframed it to sound like an admission. Every time I defended myself, he made it seem like I was contradicting earlier statements. Stories I had once shared to honor Marina were now positioned as proof she deserved half of everything I owned. When I thought it couldn't get worse, Marina submitted documents claiming I had periods of emotional instability. She used a few emails I had written during late-night work stress as proof I wasn't mentally equipped to manage large assets responsibly. I felt sick reading it. The woman who once told me she was proud of me now painted me as a liability. By then, I realized I needed help far beyond what I had expected. That's when I met with attorney Adriana Cole. She scanned the documents in silence, her expression darkening with every page. When she finally looked at me, she didn't sugarcoat anything. She told me the petition was too polished, too coordinated, and too deeply rooted to have been prepared on short notice. Marina had been building her case long before the affair. Adriana pointed out discrepancies I hadn't noticed. Unusual withdrawals from my business accounts. Requests Marina made months earlier about merging certain financial platforms. Charges that didn't align with our spending patterns. There were indicators of money being moved through channels I didn't authorize. According to Adriana, this wasn't a simple divorce. It was a maze, a calculated takedown. And there was only one way to confront it. She recommended hiring a private investigator who specialized in financial misconduct. She said if her instincts were correct, Marina had done something like this before. I felt anger, disbelief, and humiliation collide inside me. But beneath all of that was a need for answers. Answers I realized I didn't have. I took a breath and told her I was ready. I wanted to know the truth, even if it destroyed every memory I had left of my marriage. Rhea Maddox arrived at my office carrying nothing but a slim laptop bag and the kind of silence that made people pay attention. She wasn't loud, she wasn't intimidating in any obvious way, but there was something razor-sharp in her eyes that told me she had seen things most people only heard about. She introduced herself with a firm handshake and immediately asked for every document I had: bank statements, tax records, property files, emails, contracts, chat logs, anything that could leave a trail. The investigation stretched for weeks. Every day, Rhea sent me new cross-referenced spreadsheets, highlighted statements, and lists of inconsistencies that made me feel like I had been sleepwalking through my own life. Each piece of evidence chipped away at whatever illusions I had left about Marina. What I thought was a complicated woman with emotional distance was actually someone who had prepared her steps long before I ever suspected anything. The first shocking discovery was that Marina had been married twice before. Both marriages lasted barely over a year. Both husbands lost huge portions of their assets. Both settlements favored Marina. And in both cases, she disappeared almost immediately afterward, leaving behind no forwarding address and no answers. When I asked Rhea why none of this showed up in Marina's background checks before we married, she explained that Marina had legally changed her name twice, once after each divorce. Then came something even heavier. Marina had a file in Arizona tied to a fraud investigation. She had been accused of embezzling funds from a previous employer, but she skipped the state before the case could move forward. The police reports listed her under another alias, but the photo was unmistakably her. It was the face I'd woken up next to the face I thought I knew better than anyone else's. Rhea didn't stop there. She uncovered 3 shell companies registered in Nevada, companies I had never heard of with owners listed as strangers. But the IP addresses tied to the registrations matched our home network. She also found that several charges from my business card had been funneled into one of these companies. It became clear Marina was using my company's money as her personal reservoir to fund something much larger and more calculated. Then came the most devastating discovery of all. Marina and Evelyn shared a joint account in Singapore. Transfers had been moving steadily from my business account into that overseas account for more than a year, adding up to nearly $2,800,000. Every transfer was disguised as payment for consulting market analysis or international development, all expenses. Marina convinced me we needed in order to grow globally. Rhea also found email leaks from internal meetings at my company, financial projections, contract details, even confidential investor discussions that Marina had forwarded to Evelyn. It wasn't just betrayal. It was economic espionage. When Rhea showed me the timeline, something inside me went cold. Marina had hired Gareth, the same attorney who later tried to crush me in court 6 months before the affair. She was still telling me she loved me, still planning vacations with me while she was preparing a financial ambush behind my back. But the hardest blow came when Rhea presented evidence that Marina had tried to modify the inheritance documentation from my grandmother's estate. She filed a request to add herself as a co-heir to the Boulder property. The document failed only because the notary refused to accept her forged version of my signature. Had it gone through, the consequences would have been irreversible. Standing there in my office, staring at the proof of everything she had done, I realized the version of Marina I had loved never existed. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't lost. She wasn't confused or overwhelmed or misunderstood. She was methodical, intentional, precise. The relationship I invested in for 3 years had been a strategy, a sequence of steps meant to secure control over my assets. And now that I finally saw it clearly, I understood exactly what I needed to do. I had the truth. I had the evidence. And for the first time in months, I had direction. I knew what I had to bring into that courtroom. And I knew Marina wouldn't escape this time. When I stepped back into courtroom 4A, it felt different from the first day. The shame I carried then had lost its grip, replaced with the calm certainty that comes from finally knowing the truth. Still, the tension was thick enough to taste, and I could feel every eye in the room land on me as I took my seat beside Adriana. Across the aisle, Marina played her role perfectly. Tears in her lashes, shoulders trembling just slightly. She told the court she felt abandoned, pressured, emotionally neglected. She said she had sacrificed her dreams so I could build mine. It was a performance designed to win sympathy, and people in the gallery leaned forward as if she were the tragic heroine of the story. Gareth supported her seamlessly. He told the judge that Marina only wanted what the law guaranteed her: half my company, half my grandmother's estate, half of every asset gained in marriage. He requested long-term financial support, insisting Marina had placed her life on hold to lift me up. I sat still, letting their narrative swirl around me. Adriana rested a hand on my shoulder, signaling that it was time. I rose, holding the brown envelope that had become the weight and weapon of the last few months. The room quieted instantly. Marina's eyes flickered just for a second, but she quickly regained her confident posture, convinced I had nothing meaningful to offer. I handed the envelope to Judge Kingston. "Your Honor," I said, "these documents verify the truth behind my marriage." The judge opened the file and scanned the first few pages. Her expression shifted almost immediately. Confusion, disbelief, then anger. She looked up at Marina, then at Gareth, then back at the pages again, as if needing to confirm she hadn't misread the evidence. Marina's hands tightened on the table. The judge began reading aloud. "The companies in Nevada created to siphon funds from my business. The transfers to Singapore under Marina and Evelyn's names. The fraud file in Arizona. The 2 previous husbands whose assets she drained before disappearing. The emails detailing her plans to secure a claim on my grandmother's estate. The record showing she retained Gareth months before she pretended anything was wrong. Each revelation echoed through the courtroom like a blow. Marina's composure crumbled. She shouted that the documents were fake, that I had forged everything. But the judge silenced her with a single command, pointing out the signatures, timestamps, and official records that confirmed every part of the investigation. When Gareth attempted to request a break, the judge's voice cut through the room. "No, I've seen enough." She ordered an officer to step outside and call in the Denver PD unit stationed in the hallway. Marina's face went ashen. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked afraid. The ruling that followed was swift. Marina would receive nothing. All her claims to my assets were denied. She was ordered to repay every dollar she had stolen, along with multiple financial penalties. And her case was officially forwarded to the district attorney's office for criminal charges, fraud, embezzlement, and financial misconduct. An arrest warrant was issued for Evelyn the same afternoon. As 2 officers stepped into the courtroom to take Marina into custody, she broke down, not with manipulation or strategy, but with the kind of fear no acting could mask. They placed cuffs on her wrists and led her away as she called my name, begging, pleading, as if the person she had tried to destroy could still save her. I didn't speak. I just breathed. It felt like the first real breath I had taken in 3 years. And as the courtroom doors closed behind her, one image replayed in my mind. The moment the judge laughed at the evidence. The moment Marina's world finally collapsed. When the courtroom finally emptied and the echo of the gavel faded, I stepped outside into the cold Denver air. It hit me harder than I expected, sharp and honest, nothing like the suffocating heaviness I'd been living under for the last 3 years. For a moment I just stood there, letting the wind move through me, letting my body understand that everything was truly over. Not just the marriage, not just the case, but the weight I didn't realize I'd been carrying every day. I'd spent so long twisting myself into someone easier to love, someone easier to manipulate, someone who kept giving even when something inside him whispered that something was wrong. And now, standing on the courthouse steps, I understood what I had really lost. It wasn't the money Marina tried to take. It wasn't the reputation she tried to break down. It was the parts of myself I had slowly given away without noticing: my trust, my instinct, my sense of worth. But the strange thing was, once the truth was out, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel victorious. What I felt was clarity. A kind of quiet I hadn't heard in years. I thought of my grandmother, of the afternoons in her Boulder house when she told me the world would try to convince me I wasn't enough unless I handed it everything I had. She warned me that some people didn't want love, they wanted access. They wanted doors opened, wealth shared, stability borrowed. And she told me never to let anyone define my value for me. I didn't understand it then. I do now. Marina wasn't the storm. She was the lesson inside the storm. A lesson about boundaries, about intuition, about the cost of ignoring the voice inside you that knows when something isn't right. I lost years of my life trying to hold our marriage together, but those years taught me exactly who I will never be again. When Adriana and Ria found me in the hallway to congratulate me, I realized something important not everyone in the world takes. They proved that some people still show up, still stand by you without wanting anything back. They reminded me that trust isn't dead, it just needs to be earned. Later that evening, I drove back to the Boulder house. I opened the old windows, let the cold air fill the rooms, and walked through the quiet space that still smelled faintly of cedar and old books. I found the box of letters my grandmother kept, and inside was one she wrote when I was 16. She told me that freedom, not money, not success, was the greatest inheritance she could ever leave me. That if someone tried to take anything from me, I should fight for my freedom before I fought for anything else. She was right. I'm taking some time off now, not because I'm defeated, but because I finally understand what rebuilding really looks like. I want to rebuild my company with people I trust, but more importantly, I want to rebuild myself. Not the version of me who tried to be enough for Marina, but the version who knows he already is.